A lot of states have set up these online waste exchanges. Think of it like a Craigslist. You've got some extra cement, you've got some wood you need to get rid of at the end of a construction job. How do you do that? Well, you can put it on this sort of like Craigslist, if you will, and get rid of the material that way. When they do that, there's some risk associated with that. So one risk is the buyers. They're going to buy this waste, this unused cement, this wood. Is it exactly what they want? They really can't see it. It's not a branded product. How do they know that this is something that they really want to get? So there's risk on the buyer side. There's also risk on the seller side. So when the seller enters these exchanges, the question becomes, why not just dump it in a landfill? Wouldn't it just be easier to get rid of that extra wood and cement they don't need and move on to the next project? Why hold that extra inventory? It takes up space. Let's just move on to the next thing. So both the buyer and the seller have the risk that they want to mitigate somehow, and if they can't reduce that risk, the exchange won't happen. So one of the challenges with these online waste exchanges is that they have low exchange rates. And what we wanted to study is how can we increase the exchange rates with these online waste exchanges. And so we looked at different factors that influence the risk on the buyer side and the risk on the seller side.
From the buyer's point of view, it was things that were perhaps not surprising. We found that items that had more description, longer descriptions, that had pictures, and also that had perhaps a supplier that was a well-known, more brand name, larger supplier attached to them, those had a higher likelihood of exchange. Also, suppliers that were physically located closer to the buyer had a higher likelihood of exchange, which we thought was kind of interesting because this is, after all, an online exchange, and so location shouldn't matter too much, or proximity, but that seemed to have an influence. From the point of view of the supplier, we found more, I think, interesting, counterintuitive findings. So one of the things was that we found that in looking at the data that we got from the Minnesota exchange and partnering that with some of the data that we had on just what else was going on in the regions, and this was all within Minnesota, we were able to see that in counties where there were more options for reuse, those were sellers who actually seemed to have more positive exchange activity. And so that was a bit surprising. On the other hand, not so surprising perhaps, in counties where there were more options for landfill, for disposal through landfill, those were sellers that tended to have less success on the exchange. So as we kind of dug deeper, it seemed that sellers that were located in these regions where you had more opportunity for reuse, it was almost developing a culture of wanting to not bring things to landfill and maybe ride it out a little longer on this exchange, and kind of created perhaps a community even of buyers that would be out there willing to buy the items that the seller had in this community where the buyers were used to buying things in more of a recycled or reuse kind of manner.